The Democratic establishment owes the Green Party an apology. Oh, that's interesting. Now, do you remember the recount of the election spearheaded by Jill Stein? Now, Jill Stein has been called all sorts of things, a Russian lackey, somebody who the establishment definitely blames, among with many other things. For example, James Comey, the letter, Bernie Bros, all that stuff, for losing the election against Donald Trump for Hillary Clinton. Now, it turns out that the establishment has been shutting her down and shutting down the recount effort that might have actually found some proof of hacking in the election. Now, it turns out that her recount effort, if it had been financed and allowed to continue, might have actually picked up evidence that our electoral system was hacked. Raw Story explains. Recently released documents from the NSA, while not proving that Donald Trump worked with Russia to hack the vote totals and therefore change the outcome of the election, did shed some light on what might have actually happened. Now, the leaked NSA documents describe how Russian intelligence services targeted and infiltrated emails and computers of a private contractor servicing state voter registration databases in 8 states, and also sent phishing emails to 100 plus local election officials before election day. So that's what the NSA documents are actually saying. Now, say that's true, okay? So say that we're believing the NSA on what they're saying, and I know some of you are skeptical. I'm skeptical as well, but let's just go into the logic of why you would do this. Now, why would you want to hack into this contractor servicing voter registration databases rather than just go in and hack the vote and change the totals? Okay. Well, because a lot of Democrats seem to believe that Russia hacked the vote totals, which didn't actually happen because there's a lack of evidence. Now, it turns out that they wouldn't actually have to be able to change the vote, and not just the Russians, but anybody. Now, we learned from the DNC, for example, during the primaries that if you don't want people to vote, all you have to do is just mess up their registrations. If they're not registered, or if they're trying to vote in a primary, for example, re-register them as Republicans. Or if they're trying to vote in a general, just deregister them. Purge them from the voter rolls. That's voter suppression. We've seen that happen already. So would it take a whole lot for somebody, a hacker, no matter where they're coming from, a hacker to go in and change the registration and deregister a whole bunch of people? Yeah, it's actually incredibly possible. Now, the NSA documents say that the Russians or anybody is capable of doing these different types of GOP voter suppression tactics. Now, the NSA believes, and I'm saying the NSA believes, that the Russians may have scrambled voter files used to create polling place voter lists. Now, that, of course, would theoretically lead to voter purges, and that's, of course, something the Republicans have already have been known to do, purge voters. Interesting. Now, let me be clear. This NSA document is not saying that Russia stole the election for Trump and the GOP. That is not the conclusion that they came to. It simply affirmed what, ironically, the Green Party candidates said was an issue and wanted to investigate. So that's how the Green Party fits into this. Now, it says to the extent of which cyberstalkers, Russian or domestic, had infiltrated election systems in swing states. That's what they wanted to look into. Now, what's interesting is that until The Intercept released these NSA documents, now, the Intercept is run by Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald is very skeptical, and he demands a lot of evidence for these Russian hacking theories, right? Now, again, he demands evidence. We all demand evidence. Now, the thing is that he allowed this to get posted to The Intercept. There might be something there. And it's a possibility anyway, but it also may be another possibility of why it's posted, because it actually spells out a real problem that could theoretically happen. So, the Greens' concerns, their court filings by nationally known computer security experts, and the issue at large before The Intercept posted this, had been dismissed by corporate media. Now, those leaked NSA documents said that the Greens' concerns actually had some merit. Now, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia told USA Today, quote, "I don't believe they got to change into changing actual voting outcomes, but the extent of the attacks is so much broader than it has been reported so far. None of these actions, from what Warner believes of the Russians, stopped on election day." So let me first get into some of the details, the relevant details of the NSA report. The NSA report said that Russian hackers, and that's who they blame, had targeted a Florida-based election software firm that specialized in state voter registration databases, and also targeted local election officials on their computer systems. Now, they targeted these officials, of course, to get into their accounts using what they call spear phishing. Now, I don't know a whole lot about that, about internet security, so I can't really get into those different details. However, the Intercepts report had comments from computer scientists who said that those cyber attacks could allow hackers to rummage through election office files and possibly scramble voter registration records in several states. They pointed to an example of North Carolina, where on election day there were complaints of broken down e-poll books at precincts. The expert said that precinct voter lists are generated from these voter registration databases. So theoretically, if a hacker comes in, you know, they get some of these credentials, right? They get access to the system, they mess with the databases, and they make it so basically, at the end, your vote doesn't count. Your vote gets tossed away because you're not actually on any of these registration lists anymore. That's what scrambling the files essentially would do. Now, if you're purged from the rolls, obviously you can't vote. And if it's targeted in certain places, well, then that might be enough. Enough people get purged. That might make enough of a difference in an election, theoretically, right? Now, they also point out that anything else is speculative. The expert said that getting inside more routine election office computers and networks are a necessary, but an insufficient step to possibly accessing separate counting systems or central tabulators. There are actually a lot of steps for that to happen and no proof that it actually happened. Now, the Green Party, before this even happened, said, "We think this could be a problem. How about we look into this? Let's do a recount of these swing states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Let's take a look at these, of what happened in these states, and we'll see if there was any sort of malfeasance." That seems like a fair request. Now, the Democratic Party and corporate media, when this happened, well, all they did is they said, "Well, you're a conspiracy theorist. You actually think that somebody came in and hacked our elections? Conspiracy theorist." Well, what happened later? Russia hacked our elections. The Green Party was actually telling you that this was an issue and that they'd like to look into it and that a recount might actually help. Amazing. Amazing. Now, it looks like the shoe might be on the other foot now. And that's, of course, the Democrats, if they actually believe this. And look, there's, again, the NSA, not exactly the most trustworthy source or the most trusted source at this point, but it is very interesting because it actually does point out a real problem. It's not conspiratorial to think that computers that run on older hardware, some as old as 2005 hardware, right, and older operating systems couldn't be vulnerable to hacks. Of course they're vulnerable to hacks. Any computer is vulnerable to hacks. I mean, look, hackers can already get into your car and control it. You don't think that they could actually mess with the voter database? No, all it takes is the motive to try and do that. Now, do we know anybody having that motive? Not that I know of, but there's a lot of people that think that Russia does have that motive. I don't know for sure. Again, the only thing that I'm really worried about is not speculating who did it. I'm saying the NSA thinks that this happened. The Greens are saying we're not sure if it's Russia, but it could be. Okay, fair enough. But the question is, why couldn't these databases of voters not be messed with? What makes them so special? Nothing really. So yes, they are vulnerable. And that's what the NSA, the Intercept, and these computer experts think happened. Now the question again of whether or not it's Russians or domestic Republican hackers was part of the reason that the Green Party pushed the recounts in these 3 states. Because that's where it ultimately mattered. It wouldn't have mattered in California. Because California was going to Hillary Clinton to begin with. But in these swing states, this is where Donald Trump got the electoral advantage. Now, why is it so hard for the Democrats to believe that someone could penetrate our electoral system back then, and so easy for them to believe that that's what happened now? Especially since the Green Party had already asked these questions. In Michigan, for example, tens of thousands of paper ballots read by electronic scanners in black urban counties were missing presidential votes. Those are things that we already knew after Election Day. Now the Greens, they said, well, we want to hand count those ballots because those scanners sometimes mess up. And that's what could have happened. So let's go and do a recount just to be sure. Now, they also wanted to look inside of Pennsylvania's paperless voting machinery. So they wanted to look for malware that could potentially adjust vote totals. That was what they were looking for in Pennsylvania. Yet both of those states, ironically, refused to cooperate. Well, they were, states that one, of course, went for Republicans, but one of them had a Democratic election commissioner. That was Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin, Transparency Activist Observer saw its machine had cell phone modems. Now, cell phone modems, it was essentially a hacking pathway that police are able to use to spy on suspects. So it's actually pretty easy to get into. Now, the Green Party asked of those modems, is there a way that these could be accessed to plant malware for somebody who wanted to mess this up? Very interesting. But it turned out the Green Party, they got blocked at every turn, even though they were asking very important questions. Now, this is my main problem with the Democratic obsession with Russia. I don't think they actually care about security. I actually do care about security. The Green Party cares about security. And there are a lot of Democrats that do care about security. Progressives care about security. But the ones that are calling for impeachment against Russia or against Donald Trump and pushing this Russia narrative, I don't think they care about security. I think what they care about is taking down Donald Trump. And I think that has overshadowed the message of actual security. It's like the Republicans that screamed about Hillary Clinton's server when ignoring that Bush had a server, or ignoring that anybody else in office had a private server that was unsecured. Well, if you're screaming about one thing, you're not screaming about the other because of your party, it shows that you are a partisan hack. That's the problem here. Now, again, they're not looking to get to the truth of what happened. They're looking to score political points, right? Now, the NSA documents do not prove any link between Donald Trump and Russia. So far, that is a fact. Even if you don't believe the NSA documents, you are probably likely to say that there's no link between Donald Trump and Russia anyway. So let that reinforce your views, right? But it did point out real vulnerabilities in our voting databases. So basically, breaking it down, the NSA believes that state voter registration databases were targeted and accessed. These databases were electronically tied into state motor vehicle records, State Department of Corrections records, and federal Social Security records. All of them are used to verify registration information. If you scramble those in key precincts, in swing counties, in swing states, you can cause delays at polls when people show up expecting to vote but find that they're not listed. Well, if that happens, those people can't vote. Simple as that. Now, there is an obvious flaw to this theory, and it's if you were a malicious attacker, how would you know where to target your efforts? If you could figure that out, though, and get over that flaw, which is a big one. So that's a big one in that argument. You would have to know ahead of time where to hack. That seems like it would be fairly difficult to do. But say you could figure that out, or you just make a couple of random lucky guesses, then it's theoretical that you could influence and change an election. In our system. This wouldn't happen in a direct democracy system, by the way. But it happens in a system where we do electoral votes. So it would be specifically targeted towards our type of system. And actually, that's kind of what happened in North Carolina last November. Now, the Green Party's attorney tried to find out what was happening in North Carolina. His lead attorney told Alternet last fall, was the shutdown of the electronic poll book in Durham County the result of a benign malfunction or an intentional hack? If it was the latter, well, then who was behind it? These questions must be answered immediately, especially if the answers lead to questions about the integrity of the election process in other jurisdictions. And on that, we don't really know. And look, what happened in Durham County, again, we don't know. There could be other causes. It could have been the Republicans. We don't know for sure, Republican hackers or right-wing hackers. I mean, we do know that the Republican Party deployed Chris Kobach's interstate cross-check system. Now, that system was used to discriminate against African-American voters. That was the whole point. It kicked them off the voter rolls so that, you know, they don't get a chance to vote because they'll vote for Democrats and not Republicans. Well, that is a typical Republican tactic. Well, they're not going to vote for us, and so instead of championing our ideas, because our ideas suck, we'll just make it so that less people turn out to vote, and less people can turn out to vote. That's the Republican plan on that. Now, they also did so with, in North Carolina, for example, we know the GOP also racially discriminated against black people when drawing congressional districts, and they also targeted black voters with surgical precision in order to block them with vote. They used or block them from voting. They did so with voter ID laws, the ending of early voting, or doing, of course, these voter purges. In fact, you had top election officials, and I believe I remember doing a story on this, telling legislatures in June 2016 that she had found a list of 30,000 plus illegal voters. You know where she got that list? Chris Kobach. That's the stuff that the Greens wanted to look into as well. And when they tried to look into the veracity of our electoral system, whether or not they could verify votes and make sure that people were not purged from the voter rolls, they got shit on for it. They're conspiracy theorists. Even if the NSA is right and the Russians did mess with some of the things, right? Well, they would be doing it in the way that Republicans have been doing it for a long time. We know that that nobody hacked the voting machines. And we know right now that there is no link with Donald Trump. But we also know that the voter suppression effort led by Kansas State Attorney General Chris Kobach was actually, or I'm sorry, Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach was actually very successful. If these recounts had been taken seriously, there's a chance we could have found their fingerprints in this. So that's why I think the Green Party deserves a big apology. And the investigation into the Russian issue should also be continued, but should be expanded to Republican voter suppression techniques. And not only that, but we should do a serious audit on our voting databases and machines. And I think long term, we need to change our voting infrastructure. We need to get rid of those machines and go back to hand-counted paper ballots. I know, low-tech solution, but you know what? This low-tech solution actually works. Not only that, but you would eliminate the issue with voter registrations by having universal voter registration. Everybody is registered. Doesn't matter. You're of age, you're registered to vote. Boom. No purges, nothing. You're registered. That's it. What we're looking for is verification. Taking all these steps will help to verify our elections and make sure that they are, again, that they're accountable, that this election process is verifiable, and that we can make sure that everything's legit. That's what this is. So, and if you do some of this stuff, you will reduce the ability or possibly eliminate the ability for anybody, whether it be a foreign actor or whether it be a right winger or left winger, to hack into our databases and swing elections in this way by purging voters. This is the integrity of our electoral system. It's not just about Russia. It's not about any of this. It's not just about Trump. This is about having an electoral system that has integrity, where everybody's vote gets counted. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.